Princess Diana ever discuss him?
Yes, very fondly, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
When you look back, was there one particular time when you and Princess Diana just had a ball together?
A rock star and a princess seem like an unlikely pair, but Elton John and Diana Spencer shared a bond so strong that it shook the foundations of the monarchy. For a long time, the world has believed one version of their story, but many of those details were carefully polished by the palace. Now, Elton is coming forward to confess what really happened behind closed doors. It was the summer of 1981, and the entire planet was obsessed with one thing. A young woman named Diana Spencer was about to marry Prince Charles, and it felt like a movie come to life. People everywhere were buying mugs and plates with their faces on them. But while the public was watching from a distance, Elton John was right in the middle of the royal circle. He already knew the family well because he had played music for the Queen Mother and spent time with the fun and wild Princess Margaret. Even Prince Philip had cracked jokes with him. But despite being a huge star, Elton always felt like a bit of an outsider at these fancy events. He was a rock star in a world of stiff suits and old rules. Everything changed on one eventful night that Elton remembers clearly. It was the 21st birthday party for Prince Andrew held at Windsor Castle. The room was filled with the most powerful people in the country, and there were huge lights and expensive jewelry everywhere. Elton was there to play the piano, and he felt a little nervous. He was trying his best to act normal in a room full of lords and ladies, and that was when he saw her. Diana had not become a princess yet, but she already had a glow that stopped people in their tracks. She walked into the room and the whole mood changed. Elton noticed right away that she was not like the others. She did not act like a person who was about to join the most serious family on earth. Instead, she had a way of making people feel relaxed the moment she started talking. When they met, you'd think they would talk about boring royal stuff. But no, they started joking about the party and how quiet the music was. In fact, the music was so low that it was almost hard to hear. Since they both thought the party was a bit stiff, they decided to have their own fun. In the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by the most serious people in England, Elton and Diana started dancing together. They did the Charleston while making funny faces and laughing. Even the Queen saw them and could not help but smile at the sight. Elton felt like he had known her his entire life after just a few minutes. They were two people who loved to laugh and did not care about being perfect. This was the start of a bond that went way beyond just being famous, because they soon realized they shared a secret personality that the public never got to see. Once they became close, Elton realized that the version of Diana the world saw was only half the story. To the public, she was a shy girl who looked up through her hair at the cameras. But when the doors were closed and it was just her and Elton, she was a completely different person. She was funny, sharp, and loved to talk about everyone. Elton later said she was the best guest you could ever have for dinner because she was incredibly indiscreet. She knew all the best stories and did not mind sharing them. She had a wicked sense of humor and loved to gossip about the very people who thought she was a quiet and obedient member of the royal family. Elton loved this side of her, because he was the same way. They would sit together and laugh until they were tired. Diana had a way of noticing the smallest things that were funny or weird about royal life. She loved to tease Elton about his bright clothes and his huge glasses, and in return, he would make her laugh by acting out funny stories from his life on the road. They were like two kids in a classroom who were not supposed to be talking. This bond was special because Diana felt she had to be so perfect when she was in public. With Elton, she could use bad language, tell secrets, and be herself without anyone judging her. But there was also a deeper side to their connection. They were the two most famous people on the planet at that time, and that kind of life can be very lonely. Diana told him about the pressure of being watched every single second. She felt like she was trapped in a cold world where duty was more important than feelings. Elton understood this because he was also fighting his own battles. He was dealing with fame and his own private struggles. They looked at each other and saw a reflection of their own lives. They were both outsiders who had been invited into the inner circle but never truly belonged. This shared understanding made their friendship very strong, and it led to moments that were so wild they almost sounded like they were made up. One of the funniest stories Elton ever told about Diana happened at a dinner party he hosted at his home. He had invited some of the biggest stars in the world, including the actors Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone. At the time, Richard Gere had just ended a relationship, and Diana was separated from Prince Charles. As soon as Richard and Diana met, it was like nobody else was in the room. They sat on the floor by a fireplace and got locked into a deep conversation. They were laughing and talking like they were the only two people on Earth. While they were having a great time, Elton noticed that Sylvester Stallone was not happy at all. It turns out that Stallone had come to the party specifically to meet Diana and maybe even date her. Seeing her get along so well with Richard Gere made him very angry. The mood in the house started to feel very heavy and tense. When dinner was served, everyone went to the table, but Richard and Sylvester were nowhere to be found. Elton asked his partner to go find them. A few minutes later, his partner came back and told Elton that they had a big problem. He had found the two movie stars in the hallway, squaring up to each other like they were about to start a real fight. They were actually going to trade punches over who got to spend more time with the princess. Elton's partner managed to break them up by pretending nothing was wrong and telling them that dinner was ready. They eventually came to the table, but Sylvester was still fuming. He could not believe that Diana was choosing the pretty woman star over the man who played Rambo. After dinner, Richard and Diana went back to their spot on the floor to keep talking. Sylvester decided he had seen enough, so he stormed out of the house and shouted that he never would have come if he knew Prince Charming was going to be there. He was completely under her spell and could not handle the fact that she was not interested. What was even more amazing was how Diana handled the whole thing. She acted like she had no idea two of the toughest men in Hollywood were ready to hit each other because of her. She remained calm and kept her cool the entire night. Elton realized that she had a natural power that she did not even have to try to use. She could walk into a room and turn world-famous tough guys into jealous teenagers. Fearless in the face of plague. In the middle of the 1980s, the world was gripped by the terrifying arrival of AIDS. Back then, people were paralyzed by fear because they did not understand how the virus spread. Many believed you could catch it from a toilet seat or by sharing a cup. This led to a horrible stigma where those with the disease were treated like outcasts. They were often abandoned by their families and left to die in isolated hospital wards. Elton was watching his friends in the music and fashion industries pass away one by one, and he felt a deep sense of anger and sadness about the way they were being treated. He soon found that Diana felt exactly the same way. In April 1987, she did something that many people believe changed the course of history for those living with AIDS. She opened the first specialized HIV and AIDS unit at London Middlesex Hospital. While the world watched in shock, she walked up to a patient and shook his hand without wearing any gloves. To us today, that might seem like a small thing, but at the time, it was a massive deal. The royal family usually followed very strict rules about health and safety, and many people expected her to stay far away from the patients. By touching that man, she proved to the whole world that the virus could not be passed through casual contact. Elton was moved to tears by her courage. He knew that she was going against the wishes of the palace, who thought the subject was too messy for a princess to handle. But Diana did not care about being proper or safe. She spent hours visiting patients, often when the cameras were not even there. She would sit on their beds, hold their hands, and listen to their stories. Elton said that her kindness gave these men back their dignity. Her work inspired him to start the Elton John AIDS Foundation, which became his life's greatest work. They became a powerful duo in the fight against the disease. They would share information and support each other's charity events. It was a time of great purpose for both of them, as they were using their fame to save lives. However, being that famous meant they were always under a microscope. While they were busy changing the world together, a small misunderstanding about a charity project was about to cause a massive fight. The rift. By the middle of the 1990s, Elton and Diana were closer than ever, but the world around them was becoming very messy. Diana was going through a very public and painful divorce from Prince Charles. She was losing her royal protection and her title of Her Royal Highness. At the same time, Elton was working on a very special project to raise money for his AIDS Foundation. He was putting together a big book of photography called Rock and Royalty. The book featured pictures of famous stars and models taken by the designer Gianni Versace. Elton thought it would be a wonderful idea for Diana to write the foreword for the book. It seemed like the perfect way to show their shared commitment to helping people. Diana initially said yes. She was happy to help her friend and support the cause they both cared about so much. But as the book was getting ready to be printed, things took a sudden and sharp turn. Diana sent Elton a message saying that she wanted to withdraw her support. She told him that she could no longer have her name associated with the project. The reason was that the book contained pictures of male models who were not wearing many clothes. Some people at the palace had seen the images and told Diana that it was not appropriate for a member of the royal family to be linked to something so provocative. Elton was shocked and very hurt. He felt that Diana was choosing the approval of the palace over their friendship and a charity that saved lives. He had already spent a lot of money on the book, and her pulling out at the last minute was a huge problem. Elton sent her a message to let her know exactly how disappointed he was. He did not hold back his feelings. Instead of apologizing, Diana sent back a letter that Elton later described as extremely terse. It was short, cold, and very formal. It was not the kind of letter a best friend sends, but the kind a princess sends to someone she no longer wishes to speak to. This letter created a huge wall between them. For the next couple of months, the two most famous friends in the world did not say a single word to each other. Elton was too proud to call her, and Diana was surrounded by people who were telling her who she should and should not be friends with. They went from talking every week to being total strangers. It was a very sad time for Elton, who missed her humor and her company every day. He did not know that it would take a sudden and terrible tragedy to finally force them to break their silence and face each other again. A summer of death and reunions. The summer of 1997 was a time of heat and heavy hearts. On July 15th, a terrible event shook the world. The famous fashion designer Gianni Versace was killed outside his home in Miami. This was a man who was a very close friend to both Elton John and Princess Diana. The news was a huge shock to everyone. But for Elton, it was even more painful because he was still not speaking to Diana. He was staying at his house in Nice, France, when the phone rang. He was surprised to find Diana on the other end of the line. She was calling him from a boat in the Mediterranean Sea, where she was on vacation with her friend Dodi Fate. Even though they had been fighting for months, Diana did not hesitate to reach out. She asked Elton how he was doing and if he had spoken to Johnny's sister, Donatella. Then she said the words that fixed everything. She told him she was so sorry and that their fight had been silly. Just like that, the months of silence were over. The tragedy of losing their friend reminded them that life is too short to stay angry. So they agreed to meet and be there for each other during this sad time. A week later, on July 22nd, they both traveled to Milan for the funeral service at the Great Cathedral. It was a very emotional day. Elton was sitting in the front row, and he was completely overcome with grief. He was crying so hard that he could barely keep his head up. Diana was sitting right next to him, and in a moment that was captured by cameras and seen by people all over the world, she reached over and put her hand on his shoulder to comfort him. She leaned in close to whisper words of support. Later on, Elton shared a funny detail about that very sad moment. While the world saw a princess being kind to a grieving star, there was a tiny bit of her classic humor involved too. He said that at one point, she actually leaned in and asked if he had a mint because she really wanted a polo. It was her way of breaking the heavy mood and making him feel a little better. They walked out of the cathedral together, and it felt like their friendship was finally back on track. They made plans to have lunch together very soon too. Catch up on everything they had missed during the months apart. Elton left Milan feeling happy that his best friend was back in his life. He had no way of knowing that this reunion would be their very last time seeing each other alive. The facts that changed everything. In the early hours of August 31st, 1997, Elton was asleep at his home in Nice. He had no idea that the world was about to change forever. The silence of his house was broken by the sound of his fax machine. Back then, faxes were how people sent quick written messages across long distances. When Elton walked over to the machine, he saw a message from a friend. The note simply said how sorry the friend was to hear the awful news. Elton was confused because he did not know what the friend was talking about. He turned on the television to see if there was a breaking story, and that was when he saw the images of a crushed car in a tunnel in Paris. The news reporters were saying that Princess Diana had been in a terrible accident while being chased by photographers. At first, the report said she was injured, but soon the update came that she had died. She was only 36 years old. Elton sat there in total shock. Everything felt so completely unreal. Only 6 weeks earlier, they had been sitting together in Milan, laughing and making plans for the future. Now, the woman who had been a sister to him was gone. He felt a deep sense of regret because they had wasted a long month not talking over a silly book. Even though they had made up, he wished he could have had more time to tell her how much she meant to him. The entire world began to mourn in a way that had never been seen before. People were leaving thousands of flowers outside her home at Kensington Palace. Everyone was crying for the people's princess. Amidst all this grief, Elton received a phone call from his friend Richard Branson. Richard told him that people visiting the palace were writing lyrics from Elton's song, Candle in the Wind, in the books of condolence. He asked Elton if he would be willing to rewrite the song and perform it at the funeral. The song was originally written in 1973 about Marilyn Monroe, but Richard felt it perfectly described Diana's life too. Elton knew this was a huge responsibility. He called his songwriting partner, Bernie Taupin, and asked him to change the words to honor Diana. Bernie worked quickly and changed the opening line to Goodbye, England's Rose. Elton was terrified about the idea of singing at the funeral. He knew that billions of people would be watching and that he had to get it exactly right for his friend. He began to practice the new version, but the weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. He was about to step onto the biggest stage of his life to say a final goodbye, and he knew he only had one chance to get it right without breaking down in front of the whole world. On September 6, 1997, Elton John arrived at Westminster Abbey for a day that would stay with him forever. The atmosphere was incredibly heavy. Outside, millions of people were lining the streets in total silence. And inside, the air was filled with the smell of flowers and the sound of people weeping. Elton was terrified. He knew that the entire world was watching him, and he was scared that he would start crying and be unable to finish the song. He was so worried about making a mistake that he had a teleprompter placed near his piano. He did not want to accidentally sing the original words about Marilyn Monroe instead of the new ones for Diana. When it was his turn to play, he sat at the piano and began the first few notes of the new version of Candle in the Wind. As soon as he sang the word Goodbye England's Rose, a wave of emotion hit everyone in the room. It felt like he was speaking for the whole country. He kept his eyes down and focused entirely on the music. He later said that he felt like he was in a trance, doing his best to stay professional while his heart was breaking. He managed to finish the song without a single mistake, and then he quietly walked back to his seat. It was a performance that defined an entire era. The song was released as a single shortly after the funeral, and it became the biggest selling record in the history of music. It sold over 33 million copies, and all the money went to the Memorial Fund for Diana's charities. But even though the song was a massive success, Elton felt very strange about it. He told people that he never wanted to hear the song played on the radio. To him, it was not a hit record or something to celebrate. It was a memory of the saddest day of his life. He felt that playing the song for fun would be disrespectful to her memory. He made a very firm rule that he would never perform that version of the song again unless Diana's son specifically asked him to. He wanted that moment in the Abbey to be the only time the world heard those words from him. For Elton, the song was a final gift to a friend he loved dearly. But while he was saying goodbye to Diana, he knew that his job was not yet done. He had made a promise to himself that he would look after the 2 young boys she had left behind. This vow would lead him to become a fierce protector of her legacy for years to come.